Welcome to our podcast from the ground up, where we interview startup founders exploring their journeys, their success challenges, and lessons learned. We hope you be inspired in discovering what it takes to build a thriving startup. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and here with us today we have Jordan Scott, founder of Cobble, a startup that's raised $3.3 million in funding. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, a little bit about Cobble. Jordan Scott has built this app that's designed to help people make better, faster decisions together. Jordan graduated from NYU's Gallatin School of Individualized Study in 2010. She began her career as a news associate at CBS This Morning before launching her startup. Cobble
hmm
is now in 7 cities and has over 100,000 people in the community and growing. What a great way to start this here. Jordan, for you, talk to us a little bit about that transition going from CBS to a startup, and how did you get into technology?
Yeah, a great question. I think that so many of us study something that we don't end up doing. That certainly is true for me. I went to NYU and mainly focused on journalism and a little bit of fiction writing and screenwriting, actually. So a very creative major. And when it came time to graduate, I landed my dream job. I always have been a big fan of morning shows and very much glorified them. And essentially, once I got in there, CBS is a very large, very corporate company, and I never stopped to think about what that meant to me. At NYU, if you don't have an internship every single semester, you're slacking. I think it's something specific to city schools, but it was all about getting big names, well-known brands, and just stacking up your resume. So when I was at NYU, I interned everywhere from Refinery 29 to Cosmopolitan magazine to NBC Nightly was my last internship before I got the job at CBS. And all of a sudden, I was in this job where I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that this was just going to go on infinitely, and I was going to show up there 5 days a week. And I just, everything had always been work towards the next thing, work towards the next thing, work towards the next thing. And then when I landed in this job, I was like, oh, is this the rest of my life? Like that was a very freaky recognition. And so, after several months of working really hard in the news industry where, it was a morning show. So my hours were 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. It was sort of, half overnight, half during the day. And I just had nothing outside of my work also because you didn't have your nights and you didn't have your mornings. And it was just a very strange way of life. And I've always been such a huge fan of technology, of using technology. I'm the first person to download an app. I love people creating new things. And that was part of what sparked my interest in journalism, right? Was telling people stories and hearing about amazing things that people were doing. And I think I sort of had this realization that I want to do something that is newsworthy. I want to do something that is not. And so I left and I started my first business, which was called IDK Tonight. And that was really the bridge between my education in journalism and where I am today with Cobble. It was essentially an editorial website and Instagram that recommended date nights for people. It was focused on couples. And the realization I had after starting that was that there's so much great content out in the world. There's no lack of ideas. But what I felt people were really struggling with was acting on those ideas and actually doing those things. And what was the issue there? Well, decision making. Why is it so hard to make decisions? And so that's what led me to starting Cobble.
So when you started Cobble, when was that? Was that before COVID or after COVID or during COVID?
Yes, great question. I had launched IDK Tonight in 2017 and ran that. By 2018, I was already thinking about Cobble. I was already drawing rectangles on pieces of paper and being like, what would this be in an app? 2018, I spent thinking about it, designing it, being so annoying, talking to everyone about it. 2019, I spent developing the first version of it with an outside firm. I am not technical. And we were testing it in the winter, fall of 2019 with the goal to have a spring launch of 2020. And so what happened at that point was, of course, I said, let's hold off on launching. The world is shut down. This is a product about getting into the world with other people. I mean, there could not have been a worse business to launch. And what we did instead was help people make decisions on what to cook and what to order in and what to watch. And we expanded
Interesting.
into all of these verticals that we planned on launching later, but launched much faster. And so we were ready to go by June of 2020 and had a pretty successful launch. People were really excited about what we were doing. There was a lot of great opportunity for pandemic born businesses to get some news coverage. And we were able to raise our pre seed round of just over $3 million by October of 2020.
Incredible. Now, if you are a startup founder and you have an idea, you're not a technical person, more of a product minded person, you have
That's me.
the grit and the gumption to take your idea and try and bring it to the market. It takes money to build things too. So,
Yes.
was your last company funding? Did you?
Absolutely not. No, CBS was laughable. I will say, when I left CBS, I remember going to talk to the executive producer, Ryan Cadro, and just saying like, "Hey, I'm leaving. I respect you so much. I've learned so much from you. I have this idea. I'll kick myself if I don't give it a shot." And I'll never forget how supportive he was. He really made me feel good and validated my decision to leave and to try it, which I think is really rare. What he said was like, I think it shows a lot of awareness of yourself that you're doing this, and not a lot of people have that awareness. And I was like, wow, it was what I needed to hear at that moment. But no, they not the kind of situation where your previous company. Oh, do you mean IDK Tonight, by the way? I think I might have
Either
misunderstood your
one,
question.
either one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, no, the way that I was able to sort of survive before it was a business at all was I was still taking on little side hustles. I was doing social media for some other brands. I was producing content for some other cool startups. I just was doing lots of odd jobs. And then I got my first angel investment from friends and family to actually build the MVP, which I understand is really rare and not available for most founders. So in that way, I'm just really lucky to have those kinds of people in my life, and that's how I built the first version.
Now, starting with an outside firm to develop what you want
Hmm.
can be tricky. You have to make sure that they understand really what your needs are, your requirements. It may or may not work. Were you one of the lucky ones that you found the right firm out of the gate and they're still with you? Or did you go through a few before you landed on the right talent?
We did go through a few. Ultimately, one firm built the very first version of Cobble. And I'd say we fell somewhere in the middle. I don't think we were like supremely lucky and I still work with them. That's certainly not the case, but I don't think we were screwed over like a lot of founders where, the code is completely a mess and the product is like not usable. That is certainly not what happened with us. Um, I got a solid version out that worked, and I was able to, build my own team from that $3 million investment after we had built it with the firm. So at that point, I just really wanted my own team in house. And that was a huge jump for me because I remember talking about it with my husband when it was just me and working with this firm. I felt so lonely and alone in the business. And it felt like I was the only one that was going to make or break it, which is the truth, really. When you're a founder, it is that situation. But as soon as I hired my first team member, I never said I was lonely again. Then it came with a whole new set of problems.
Well, I want to go back to your funding. 3.3 million dollars is a good amount of funding. You had an MVP. What was your strategy on getting the funding? And did you go to traditional institutions? What was your process? How many times did you pitch? Give us the behind the scenes experience.
Well, I think you have this vision of what it looks like to raise money. And it was, for me, it was walking into boardrooms in high floor offices and shaking people's hands. And of course, it was, the summer and fall when I was raising of 2020. And so it was just me in a chair on a screen all day. And sometimes the pitches, by the way, we did all angels, so no institutional investors. It was
Okay.
all privately wealthy angels that, started again from that friends and family round and just were connections of connections of connections. And ultimately, we were able to get it together. But it was a lot of figuring out how to create FOMO, how to, get people to loop their other investor friends in. And sometimes, the pitches, my advice is like, just be passionate about what it is you're pitching. Never get sick of telling the story. Um, for me, sometimes I would be on a pitch call. One night, I remember there was a bunch of doctors that I don't even know how I got in front of them, and I don't know why they were interested in Cobble, but there was one guy like sleeping during it very clearly on the couch. And I think, there was like 10 or 12 doctors on there, and a couple actually did end up throwing money in. And I was like, they hated that. Like, what was that? And then other times I thought a pitch went incredibly well and never heard from them again. So all of it's to say, like, all you can control is yourself. And, try to recognize what the questions are that you're being asked over and over and over again and be prepared for them and hone those responses and see what's hitting and what's not. But at the end of the day, yeah, you can only control yourself. And so, not to get too hung up on the responses from investors.
Yeah. I'm sure you learn how to refine and optimize what you're pitching, and you probably get better as you go. So, we've
That's the
talked to some
idea.
founders that have created a list of 2,000 investors are going to pitch to, and they get to 150 and they have to retool their pitch. And then ultimately they end up getting the funding. But, it's not a simple, let's make 5 calls and, we'll raise their capital. It's really a full-time job for a lot of founders initially, and maybe even
Yeah.
consistently as they go.
Well, I'll say, we're raising our next round right now, and we are going the VC route. We are going, into a totally different world. It is different from angels. It's almost like you have a really huge leg up when someone has introduced you to another angel. Like they're already halfway through the door. They're like, oh, my buddy's investing in this. I'm probably going to want to invest in this too. You're just starting from a totally different starting point. Whereas with VCs, like, you really have to pitch yourself. This is why you should trust me. This is why you should like what I'm working on. This is, you can get a warm intro from another founder, but it's just not the same. So trying to figure out how to just climb a much larger mountain as we speak.
Now, you started the company, and when you began creating what you built, starting with the product is one thing, but then building a community is a totally different game.
Mm.
100,000 people, that's a lot of people, and it sounds like you're continuing to build it. What's the process of building a community?
Yeah, well, I actually would recommend a little bit of the opposite. I started the community first with IDK Tonight. And I really, really recommend people try to build a community before their product is out in the world. Whether that means it's literally just still an idea on a piece of paper, or you're actually in development, or it just, as soon as you have the idea, whip up an Instagram, whip up a newsletter, whatever it is, start building the community. Because if you already have a group of people to share this with, they're going to be a little bit softer with you. They're going to be a little bit more, willing to deal with your issues at first. And they're going to be bought in more than just totally cold people. So I guess my advice there is, as much as you can build a community before you put something out into the world, the better. Now, of course, we have our product out in the world, and it's about how do we continue building a community. And I think that there's several different ways to do that as well. The first one that comes to mind for me is we recently partnered with another massive brand, Girl Boss, to put together an event. And it was really cool because the Girl Boss audience of over 2 million people used Cobble's technology of picking a place that we all wanted to go to dinner and network together as like cool female founders and business owners, whatever. So they all voted on a great restaurant. Cobble's tech worked. It was awesome. And then we all went out to dinner and had an amazing time. And like, you don't build connection better than in person around a table, maybe with a drink. So that combination of partnering with a bigger brand, getting people to love and use your product, and really solidifying relationships with, maybe it was 20 people, but those 20 people are forever mouthpieces of your brand now and are wanting to come to the next thing you do. And so in that way, that was a really fun community building experience that we had.
Partnerships are such a big part of companies that we don't even think about. For example, Microsoft, 90% of their revenue or close to that comes from partners. They don't sell direct.
Right.
Amazon, 20% of, their revenue, or much more than that actually, is all affiliates that are selling products on their platform. So we don't talk a ton about partnerships and affiliates, but that's such a big part of building a business or different revenue channels, or building a community in your case and getting more
Yeah.
awareness. Um, as you talk about the company itself, what's the business model?
Yeah, so our business model, the best way you can think about it is that we are driving decisions, and driving decisions drives revenue. If we are successful in helping a group of people figure out that they all want to go to a Yankee game and then they buy Yankee tickets off of Cobble, we get a share of that revenue. If someone figures out what to watch on Netflix and they, for whatever reason, don't have Netflix yet and they sign up through a link in Cobble, we get a portion of that revenue, and on and on and on. So revenue share is really the basic level, but then there's also, as you mentioned, really incredible strategic partnerships. So brands have worked with us around helping their customers or their user base make a decision on their content, whatever that might look like, using Cobble's tech. So that's us selling into another business, which is then not only a great way to make revenue, but also another way to grow Cobble, because those users use it over on, Altos Tequila's website, to figure out what to cook and what to watch while they're drinking, their margarita. So then they come and download Cobble as well. So as much as we're huge believers in win-win-win-win opportunities, and it's just an exercise in creativity, which, going back to my education, while I didn't take a single business class and wish that I had, the sort of creative education and, how to write and how to communicate and how to convince, that has been paramount.
Storytelling is a big part of a business too. And having a journalistic background sounds like you really are good at doing that. Um, as you started your company, every organization we work with, and we help build startups once they get funding and they scale up, we help recruit and find the right people, maximize the ones they have, help them drive revenue in different ways. Companies always ask us, we want to build a company that's diverse, that's got
Mm.
diversity of people, whether it's, men versus women versus nationalities, international, whatever it happens to be, diversity is top of mind for a lot of companies. Talk to us about your company and the diversity of that, and how you went ahead and built your company in a way that's very diversified.
I don't know if I have a great answer for this. I think that as a female founder, I've sort of naturally drawn diverse candidates to the business. We're mainly female, but at the same time, it's all about hiring the best person. And I think that I'm lucky to attract the best candidates that are diverse. And, they're harder to come by. There's fewer minorities in the world. And I think if you just do a really great job of branding your business and selling your business as this amazing place to work, which we did so much work on, like, what does our LinkedIn page look like? And how do we get, these unicorns of like incredible, diverse, but the best candidates? And so that's what we've done. And also, hiring during the pandemic allowed us to have the ability to hire anyone anywhere, which is also going to contribute to having a diverse team. So, our CTO is French. He's based in Paris. Again, it's sort of like, as the right people have fallen into our lap, it sort of worked out. I think in this next phase of growth, where we'll be hiring a lot more people and we'll be a bit bigger, and it's not going to be me directly sort of doing that aspect, we are going to work harder on, making sure that we're interviewing diverse folks and that we're bringing, making sure that the company is diverse, because obviously we all know the research shows that businesses are stronger and better when you have diverse opinions. And that's what we want to do.
Really nice. Um, when you look at your company today and where it's at versus when you started, a lot of companies go through pivots or changes or have to redirect where they're going, navigating through the forest to
Mhm.
hit their target market. Has there been one breakthrough or one change or one pivot you look back to and say, we need to figure this out or else we're not going to be around?
We were born in a pivot, right? Like the fact that we thought we built one thing and then when we were about to launch, we couldn't launch that. So we had to pivot. I think that's just been the headline for this company because we're not afraid to pivot. We're not afraid to iterate and experiment, which is absolutely crucial for a startup. And the main pivot that comes to mind beyond, expanding our content and trying to address people who were stuck in lockdown was moving beyond couples into groups of friends and all sorts of relationships. That was a big change that, I think we probably could have done more gracefully, but ultimately was the right decision and has given us so much greater of a palette to sort of work off of. But yeah, there's been plenty of changes. I think that'll be us forever, is continuing to just grow. I mean, even as technology changes, we're already using ChatGPT. If you asked me if I was using ChatGPT in 2020, I'd be like, what is that? That's not a real thing. So in that way, you're also always growing.
You talk about ChatGPT. Is AI integrated with your platform in any capacity yet or on the
Yes.
roadmap?
Yes, it's very much on the roadmap. It's a huge part of our roadmap, but we are using it in some senses already, as I mentioned. Right now, Cobble is launched in 7 cities, but we're continuously figuring out how we can be everywhere. And so, in one of those ways that we're doing it is people are able to add their own ideas to Cobble to make decisions on, whether that's a restaurant or a bar or an event. And when you add in the name of a place, we use ChatGPT to spin up a description of that place and sort of create a beautiful Cobble card for them. So just trying to make it easier.
Really cool. What's the biggest challenge for your company today in this market or just in general at the stage you're in?
Yeah, I mean, of course, fundraising is very much front of mind. It's a tough time to raise. Um, and we are really excited about our future and our traction that we've gotten up until this point. But sometimes it's really not about that. It's about the conditions of the world. And so I'd say that's our biggest challenge that we face today. But even so, I believe there's always a path forward. You can't be afraid to start over. And I don't mean like start a new company. I mean like if it was just me again today running Cobble, what does that look like? How could I keep it going? How could I attract new talent? How could I attract new investors based on what I'm doing differently? I never will let this die, essentially.
I hear the passion. I love that. A lot of companies build digital platforms or SaaS platforms, and the reoccurring revenue is there. The model is in place. They have partnerships, affiliates. But, we're not an online world. We also have people you shake hands with and you meet. Um,
Mhm.
What's your process with sales, and do you have a sales team that's out trying to generate new opportunities, new partnerships, affiliates? Is it all online?
Yeah.
What's your strategy there around sales?
We right now just have a director of growth who is doing everything from growing Cobble, growing our user base, and also growing our partnerships. So that's one of the main things we plan on doing with our next raise is building out a business development team to scale all of the different revenue experiments we've done this year. And so yeah, it's definitely on the roadmap, but today it's just me and my director of growth.
Really cool. Yeah, we in today's market, we hear three things. We work with, 300 plus startups today, and we always ask, what's the biggest challenge you have? And there's really three areas. One is they may not be hiring new people, but how do they maximize the people they have today? What are
Mm.
they doing? How do they really measure it? How do they guide them or educate them? And I interviewed 200 chief people officers to understand what was their strategy as an HR person with your current teams, and nobody gave me one silver bullet. There
Of
wasn't like,
course.
if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to take your C players to Bs or Bs to As. And so we went on this journey and to try and figure out what was the best way to do this. And we found it. And it's AI and it's technology, and it's a platform that helps you take your current team that through a browser can see through 150 points what they're doing day to day, and they can show the habits and the patterns that an A player is doing well versus a B player that maybe isn't quite doing everything the A player is doing. And you could take that as a tool and share that amongst your people. You can
Mm,
also decide what people aren't really ready to stay at your company, but you can
mm,
also educate the ones that are there and move them up. So we went out and said, okay, well, if we understand what that is now, then we can help people make their people better. And the second thing was, how do they generate more revenue? And so for your situation where you're now looking to add a team or build a team that's going to be more proactive as salespeople, you can build a team, you can hire them, you can hope it works. If it doesn't work, there's challenges, it costs. It's like 75 grand every time to replenish a new hire. There's a lot of companies out there that do this as a service. It's like an augmented sales practice. And companies like Microsoft, for example, will launch a new market and they'll hire a third party team, not their own team, to launch. We want to build $50 million in this town in the next 6 months. That team will go out and do it. And so we've built a lot of relationships with these types of companies that can help organizations at a lower cost point drive revenue with new strategy, maximize the people they have today, and ultimately do it in a more cost effective way. So there's a lot of innovative things happening out there in the marketplace in these market conditions today. I think it's really important to really understand what's working for other companies and try things out. But it takes
mm.
funding. Sounds like you're in a good position as you start to kind of build to explore these as well. You know, as a leader of your company, and there's ups and down in your organization, what do you do to stay positive? Is there any sort of tools that you use to keep your morale up or keep the morale up of the company?
Oh, it's such a relevant question. I think this week especially has been really tough, not only with what's going on in the world, but just being in this phase of growth and having runway only another few months. And how do you, both keep your team inspired and prepare them for worst case scenario, which they need to be completely aware and prepared for worst case scenario. And I think that the way that I get out of serious slumps when you're just like, damn, like, why are we in this position? Could I have raised earlier? Any of these questions is just to sit down at your desk and like do what you need to do. You know what you need to do. You need to talk to people. You need to reach out to people. Like in our case, right? It's fundraising. And again, complete transparency. So there's no doubt in my mind that I'm dropping this bomb on everyone at the end of the year or anything like that. It's like everyone knows what the deal is. And let's just have that be the worst case and they actually we'll figure it out. So it's a fine line to walk and I'm definitely still navigating it, but as I speak to you in this moment, I actually do feel really excited and positive about our prospects to get funded. And I'm just really proud of having a team that's willing to, take the risk with me.
Yeah, it's trying times for a lot of companies, and there's also opportunities for a lot of companies. It sounds like you've got a great platform, you've got a good team in place, and things are moving in the right direction. Um, where does Cobble go from here? You're building it, you're getting funding. What do things look like over the next 6, 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, we're going to build out that business development team to really scale our revenue. But we're also going to continue changing the product's functionality to account for decisions beyond, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? It's really whatever you make decisions on with other people, whether that's picking an Airbnb for a bachelorette party or, booking flights somewhere. We want Cobble to be the technology that people turn to make decisions. And so it's just going to be a lot of product work, a lot of hiring, and figuring out how to get to that next phase of growth where, everything is running smoothly and now we just need to be everywhere.
Sounds great. Well, Jordan, I guess as we wrap up here, if someone wants to find out about you, connect with you, potentially invest in your company, or just in general connect with your community, where do they find you? Where do they find Cobble?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, Jordan Scott. And Cobble is at Try Cobble on every social media platform. If you DM us, our social media manager will get back to you, and the message will be passed on to me as well. But yeah, would love to connect, whether that's about hiring, because we're going to make this raise happen in 2024, or, want to use Cobble. We're in New York, LA, Miami, Austin, Dallas, Chicago. I think I'm forgetting one. I should know all 7 cities we're in, but we've been waterfalling these new launches so quickly, it's hard to keep them straight.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining here today. And thank all our listeners for listening. It really means the world to us that you've taken your time to spend it with us today. And as your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, excited to catch up with you, Jordan, in the future, and our listeners on the next episode. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible, and for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.